Hey, it's T-Maker from Zeiierman's Group, and I wanted to share a new feature with the Cumulative Delta indicator that I'm personally super excited about. Now, if you haven't yet watched my first video on mastering the Cumulative Delta, I recommend going back and watching that video first so that you understand the basics of how this indicator is supposed to work. Okay, so before we begin, let's quickly run through the setup. Now I just have the default indicator loaded in right now, so I'm going to go to the settings. And what I like to do is change this to estimated, and we'll go ahead and change the signal line to 3 for this example. And I'll go ahead and add the confirmation line as well. And for now, let's just start there. So I'll hit OK. Now, if you recall from my last video, I use the signal line to identify pullbacks within a trend, and I enter trades on those pullbacks. But what I didn't mention is that many times the best long entry tends to be a higher low on the signal, and the best short entry tends to be a lower high on the signal. So you might be asking yourself, what exactly does he mean by that? So let me take my drawing tool, and what I'm referring to is, or are these little peaks. Those are what I would consider to be highs, and these little lows are what I consider to be the lows. And so if this one was higher than this one, that's what I consider to be a higher low. And for example, this one is higher than this one over here, so that's a higher low. This one is lower than this one right here, so that's a lower high. Here's another high. It's also a low. Once it ticks up, it turns into a low. Here's another high, here's a low, and here's a high. So let's go back and let's look at this with more context. So we have the price moving up right here, and the signal makes a high. We were just in a down move, and so this could potentially be a pullback within a downtrend. And so you could take this first one here. If you did, you would have probably entered short right about here, and you likely would have got stopped out. Here on the signal line, it makes a higher high. And so if I was going to short this, what I personally would be doing is I'd be waiting for a lower high. And it's kind of hard to see here, but this high is actually lower than this high. And this is actually the new feature that Zeiierman just released in the Cumulative Delta that will help identify a lower high and also identify a higher low. And so if I was to short this lower high, my entry would actually end up being right here. And as you can see, that is the optimal short entry for this move down instead of the previous two. Okay, so let's go back into the indicator settings and I'll show you how to turn that new feature on. So if you scroll down, you'll see a new section that says up, down, tick, signal. And what you want to do is you want to check this box, and let's just go ahead and change this to a 1 for now. I'll explain what this means later, but we'll just change that to a 1. And don't worry about the filter for now. So I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. And what you'll notice is now we have these green triangles every time we have a high or low, and then we have red triangles every time we have a lower high. And so you can see where this red triangle showed up. If I would have shorted right here, that would have been a beautiful move to the downside. Looks like about at least a 4R on that one. Now you probably noticed that we have a lot of triangles on the screen now, and some are more relevant than others. And so for example, these two green triangles at the bottom, the second one would have been a good long. You would have been longing from, here, grab my drawing tool again, would have been longing from there up to here, and that would have been a good trade. But the second green triangle right here obviously that would not have been a good trade. And so what you'll find is that the green triangles that are relevant, the ones that you want to pay attention to, tend to be in the lower part of the screen. So if you're longing, you want to long from the bottom half. And if you're shorting, you want to short from the top half. So Zeiierman actually added a filter so that we could filter those out. So if we go back to the settings, and if you check the box that says add signal filter, and then check this box that says level bull and level bear, then you have more control over which signals you want to be relevant. Okay, so now we have this green line and this red line. Any of the higher low bullish signals that that occur below this green line, those are going to be relevant, and those are going to be alerted to the screen. And likewise, any bearish lower high signals that occur above the red line, those are going to be printed on the screen. And so it's going to filter out all of the other signals that happen in between. So we can go back in here and, for example, I can go and change this level bull to the halfway point. So I'll change it to 5, and I'll also change the bear to 5. So when I do that, both lines will move to the middle. And so now it's only going to show the bearish signals in the top half, and it's only going to show the bullish signals in the bottom half. Now, if you recall from my previous video on delta squeezes, what I tend to do is I wait for this delta to come to the bottom and to touch or almost touch the bottom. And what I wait for is I wait for the signal to cross the delta and then tick down and then tick up with a little bit of space in here. And I call that a delta squeeze, and I typically enter on that tick up that happens right there. And what that actually is it's a higher low from the tick up that occurred prior to it. And as you can see, we don't actually have a higher low that occurs right there, so I would not have taken this trade. But we do have a green triangle here that indicates that you have a higher low there. But because the delta is still really thick, and because it's still falling and we haven't crossed it yet, to me, that's not a relevant signal. So I'm personally waiting for it to cross and then tick up. So for example, here we cross, and there's actually a tick up right here. You can't see it because it's underneath the triangle, but that is a higher low tick up after that cross. So I would have gone long right about there with a stop under here. And that looks like that was a decent trade there. And for the short, you do have a lower high here. So I would have taken that because the delta is still in the bottom half of the screen. And so that would have had you shorting from about right here with your stop up here. And that still would have been a decent trade moving to the downside. So let's go back and see if we could find some more of these setups. Okay, so here's a lower high. However, I wouldn't consider this relevant because the green delta candles are really thick and they're still rising up to the top. We do end up crossing below, but it doesn't tick down underneath that delta, which is what I typically wait for with the delta squeeze. The delta's starting to get really thin there, so I might have shorted that, but again, we don't get a cross and then a tick down that's a lower high. So I probably would not have taken that one. Here we go. Here's a lower high right there. So the short would have been here, stop above there, and you do have a decent move down. Here is a higher low. For potential long there. There's not much of a move there. And typically if I get in a long like that and then it comes down and it makes a lower high like right here, that's where I would typically exit early. And so there's still probably a little bit of profit there, not too much on that one. Here's another lower high Here's another. Might have gotten stopped out on that one before the down move. When it's really trending hard, like right here, how you can see how this delta is just kind of stuck along the bottom, I consider that to be a very strong downtrend, and I don't trade against the trend when it's doing that. So in that scenario, I would be waiting for a single tick down like this one right here to go short, and down she goes. Here's a lower high for another short to the downside. Here's a lower high, entry would be right there. Here's a lower high, entry right there for another move down. Here's another one. That one's beautiful. The entry's right there at the top. Here is another one right here. Depending on how close you had your stop, you might have got stopped out if it was really tight, but that's another beautiful move down. And this one right here confirms that one. So if I wasn't short here, I'd definitely be short on this one here. And again, this one right here, it's a lower high. There's your move down. Here's your higher low. So your long entry would have been there, stop under here. There's a decent move up. There's another higher low. There's your move up. Here is your lower high. There's your move down. As you can see, this is a very powerful setup, very powerful strategy. And but that's it. That's primarily how this new feature works in the Cumulative Delta. So if you guys have any questions, please let me know, and I'll help out as best as I can. All right, take care, guys.